By doing so, you announce in advance that your goal is not winning.
That's not.
And I think the last 50 years of secretaries of defense would say,
Senator,
if your goal is not to win, you shouldn't be involved.
Do you want to go to war in Syria? Of course not. Everybody, 100% of Americans will say no. We say no. We don't want to go to war in Syria either. It's not what we're here to ask. The president is not asking you to go to war. He's not asking you to declare war. He's not asking you to send one American troop to war. He's simply saying we need to take an action that can degrade the capacity of a man who's been willing to kill his own people by breaking a nearly 100-year-old prohibition. And will we stand up and be counted to say we won't do that?
Welcome to Opinion Journal. I'm Mary Kissel. That was a very testy exchange yesterday between Secretary of State John Kerry and Kentucky Senator Rand Paul on the merits of intervening in Syria. Yesterday, our Bret Stephens made the case for intervention, and today we've got American Enterprise Institute Senior Fellow John Bolton here to make the opposite case. Welcome, Ambassador.
Glad to be with you.
Are you against any kind of intervention, or just the kind of intervention that Secretary of State Kerry was describing?
Well, that exchange you just played is a little bit like the Syrian civil war to me. Neither side is acceptable. You know, look, the fact is we don't know what intervention President Obama is actually proposing, and I think that's a big part of the problem. He says that he wants to vindicate his drawing of a red line, but he also talks about his intervention being proportionate and limited. And if that's in fact what he does, he will not establish conditions of deterrence. He will not persuade Assad, or more importantly, the regime in Tehran, to give up their nuclear weapons program. So in that sense, I'm very worried that because it goes beyond the loss of credibility the president has already experienced, given March's evidence of the use of chemical weapons by Assad, it will implicate the entire United States. And I think a limited response will simply tell Iran that it's got essentially free sailing toward nuclear weapons.
But if the U.S. doesn't respond in a limited way, or in the way that you might prefer, a stronger kind of intervention, what message does that send to U.S. allies like Israel in the region?
It sends a message that we have a president whose word you can't trust. But I don't buy the argument that the president is the equivalent of the United States. I do not buy it. The president that sits behind the desk in the Oval Office is not a cardboard cutout. It's a flesh and blood person. And when the flesh and blood person changes, the message that comes out of the Oval Office changes. When Ronald Reagan replaced Jimmy Carter, it may not have been night and day, but it was pretty close. And the same is true in the case of whoever replaces Obama.
Okay, but we still have several years left of the second term of the Obama administration. Global View columnist Bret Stephens was on the show yesterday, and he argued we don't have time to wait here, and in fact that Israeli action against Iran is more likely if we don't intervene. So again, I ask you, why would you not support what the president is asking for?
I think the Israelis should strike Iran's nuclear weapons program, whether we intervene in Syria or not. There's no way that Obama is going to use force against Iran, and a weak response here, or no response, gives the Iranians exactly the same message. I'm deeply worried about the next 3.5 years. I didn't vote for Obama in large measure for that reason, but the American people did. And you know the saying, you get the government you deserve. So we've got 1,200 days of danger. That's a fact.
That is a fact. Iran's influence is also extending from Tehran now potentially to the Mediterranean. Again, doesn't that argue for U.S. intervention now?
But if the intervention is weak, it will send the wrong signal. And every indication is, from the president's own words, which is all the evidence we have at this point, a proportional, limited response will not be enough.
Okay, American Enterprise Institute Senior Fellow and former Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, with the last word. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Mary.